Let's go ahead and jump in a little bit deeper here. So the first thing that I want to kind of cover is going to be really preparation, right? So when we talk about digital transformation, one of the things that I had mentioned a little bit earlier is the fact that there are many different steps that you go through with digital transformation to really address the needs of an organization. And I look at those as really four different phases that you're going to look at. And the very first one of those is really preparation. And that is just understanding and focusing on your existing culture, processes, and data. And you'll hear it as well used as people, process, and technology as part of that. But really starting to do your homework to understand what is the core that you have in the organization so that you can then embrace more of a digital culture. And that's a really important topic that I want to bring up because if you think about it longer term here, when it comes to digital transformation, it's a digital mindset, right? It's a digital mindset that can affect the physical output that you tackle inside of your organization. And so, in order to very successfully execute, obviously, on that transformative process, you've got to start thinking at it from that digital perspective to start, and then also how you're going to bring people along as you go through this journey. So, the very first thing I typically start talking to when we start looking at digital transformation is the fact that we need to have our leadership team bought into the concept of going through a digital transformation journey. So, digital transformation journeys, the most common one that you'll ever hear is more than likely a business system replacement, right? Where what you're going to be doing is you're going to be replacing the ERP or the enterprise resource planning based capabilities of the software that drives your business. And so that's typically going to be what you call your financials, your supply chain management, your inventory. All of those processes are important. But as you can imagine, if you try to replace a core business system without leadership buy-in, you're not going to typically get very far. If anything, we all know that budget number is probably going to stop it dead in its tracks right as you go through that. So the importance of having leaders understand that that tone that they set is actually one of the most critical concepts that we can have in a successful transformation when we look at using digital tools to augment physical realities that we interact with. We want to foster a culture that's open to change and innovative in that change, meaning we don't want somebody to come into the organization and be like, no, this is the way it is. It's always been done like that. We need to think about how we can do better or what we can do to basically make that more efficient or faster or scalable. There's many different things that go into obviously the embracing of a digital culture, but those are really key aspects. And then also, how do we train employees? How do we up level or upskill them so that they can basically come to work and not feel that their jobs are just overwhelming because not only are they having to change all the time, but they're trying to basically keep everything together, right? So, this digital culture perspective is something that's really critical for organizations because what we're seeing more and more is that technology is very transformative in the efficiencies and goals basically that organizations are trying to tackle. Now, as part of that, though, you need to start by basically assessing really your current processes inside of the organization. You need to, for example, map out the existing workflows that you have. And what do I mean by existing workflows? Well, how do you do your cash application processing? How do you enter in an order when a customer calls? And it doesn't mean that you map out what you enter inside of a system per se. It basically says, I pick up the phone. I have a conversation with the customer. I greet them in a specific manner because that's part of our corporate culture that we want to basically instill. And inside of those particular workflows, as an example, they may not have a technology behind them that's supporting them to address that particular need, right? But it's really critical to document the full physical process with its digital hooks as well that you interact with so that you can start to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies inside of that process. Meaning, well, for example, at the end of a shipment process, should we be sending out a notification to our customer? what should that notification have as an example on what was shipped? Should it have more personally identifiable information inside of it, right? So these are different things that you need to start thinking through, but assessing basically those current processes is going to be critical. And then finally, understanding what those objectives are for improvement is something that you're going to want to basically identify as you go through that. This is the interesting thing from my perspective with this. I do this every single day. As a pre sales architect, as an example, I jump in and I identify what you do inside of your process. And I care a little bit as to what happens in the system, but I really care more about why you're doing that. What is the data that you're trying to get out of it as you go through that process? What are the pain points, which would be number two, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies? And then where do you want to go ultimately as part of this process, right? So remember, as part of your digital transformation process, not only do you need to get everyone aligned from that digital mindset, that digital change mindset, but you also need to know what your base platform is. So that way you understand what you're going to change and what the improvement is going to be for those changes so that you know what is successful and what is not successful as you go through this digital transformation process. Now, the other thing to note is that you also need to make sure that you understand really that transformation is also going to be impacted by data accuracy, by accessibility, and also by integration, right? So you need to start thinking through, for example, different types of data and how accurate is that data, because that can affect obviously what you're doing then in your process. As an example, if you have opportunities that you're not updating continually as you go through your sales process, well, the accuracy of those that may impact, for example, your selling arm that may then be doing the implementation of your product or maybe the installation, for example, they may be affected then by poor quality opportunity data, right? So understanding where you are in terms of what that data accuracy is, what rules you have in place for what you're governing for data so that you don't have different reports that have different values for the same value that it's supposed to be, right? And then also understanding how you're going to be integrating those systems because remember the lens of data nowadays is typically the same data has multiple different lenses when people are looking at that data to understand what is it that they need to improve or to make more efficient are really going to be part of obviously that data readiness and management perspective with it. So just to kind of summarize at a high level, you need to have a digital change mindset. You need to identify your existing workloads and you need to identify your existing data where it's located so that you can actually understand then what that journey is going to be. Now, after you've gone through a lot of this analysis right up front, what you're going to be looking at next is building, right? How are you going to build a unified platform with a solid tech stack? And this is a really interesting concept compared to where I came from, right? Because what I came from back in 2000 when I entered into this industry is that we would have best of breed, right? That would be very targeted applications, and they were all separated as an example. And a lot of companies went down that path. But what they found is that data, once again, needs to be looked at by different people, but it's the same type of data. An example of that in a CRM process, you still have customers potentially for opportunities, but then also in an ERP or enterprise resource planning application, you may be shipping product to those customers as well. Same customer, two different types of workloads that you tackle with it. So building a unified platform allows for you basically to get then to that digital transformation that you really need. And just as an example around that, selecting the right technologies matters. Now, I know a partner that you can reach out to help with that. Lots of fun there to kind of say. But I guess the big thing here is the fact that selecting the right technology is really important. I love vehicles, I love cars. I always equate it down to vehicles because they're so easy and relatable for so many people. You would not buy an F-150, if you're going to be towing 12,000 pounds typically, right? You're probably going to be jumping up to a 250 or a 350, right? A bigger truck basically to be able to do some of that hauling as an example. And selecting the right technologies as well from a Microsoft perspective is also really important. As an example, Business Central is an ERP application, and so is Finance and Operations. They're both owned by Microsoft, but they're different size technologies depending upon the different needs of an organization. So if you think about it, you need to identify, for example, what the scalability, the compatibility, and the cost is for that particular platform, whether or not you're going to be looking at cloud or on premise. And candidly, you probably should be leaning many more times towards cloud because of the capabilities that cloud adds. But there are scenarios that you need some type of on premise type capability, or maybe even what we call hybrid, where, for example, field service workers may need to actually have a local copy on their actual device, which we would almost consider on premise, to basically go through and then, for example, do an installation of a particular product. But there's also the other fact of the matter, which is that vendor support and community is a critical component of what that strategy is going to be. If you align, for example, with a technology partner that has 100 customers versus aligning with a technology partner that has thousands of customers, typically that vendor, that support, that community on the larger vendor in that situation is going to then have potentially a better impact in your business, right? Or a more influential impact, or a larger community that can help you through some of these obstacles that you may be facing or these challenges, right? So the importance of selecting that technology is absolutely critical when you go through this digital transformation process. And like I said, I'm opinionated. I've been in the Microsoft realm now for quite some time. I guess the case in point here is the fact that when we talk to you about those technologies, that's really what we're trying to do is we're trying to identify the right technology, not the technology that we want to sell to you. And that is a really important distinction. Now, the other thing that you have to start thinking about is going to be the integration then of these systems because candidly, we're getting more and more into the age where we almost have like these best of breed systems, but we have a unifying data model between these different applications then that makes it to have basically the best of both worlds. As an example, you can have Dynamics 365 Field Service, have your products, your accounts, and all that data from your ERP application, we'll say Business Central in this example, synchronized over to Field Service. But then when you actually sell or invoice, for example, a field service call that you do, you can have that generate an invoice then inside of Business Central. So these integration points inside of a system, the modularity of the system is really, really critical, obviously, for that future growth that you may be looking at. So how do you tackle that? Well, you talk through, well, what are those strategies? Are we going to have a application stack that has a native API integration like Dynamics, or do we need to involve middleware? It's still a very valid point, right? Because you may have Kappa, for example, in medical device is a really critical requirement, and there's not many Kappa systems that are built, for example, directly inside of Dynamics. Instead, they connect through middleware to be able to address it. So understanding what those integration points are going to be a really critical perspective as well in your digital transformation journey. And you should be documenting what those are as you go through your existing business process as well. The other aspect of it that you want to really focus on is really the fact that you need to overcome some of these common integration challenges. Meaning, if you're involving a partner that does not natively have, with the same products that they have, a integration between those products, well, are you throwing away money potentially at that point, right? In part of that integration strategy. So overcoming those and understanding what those common integration challenges are going to help you as you go through that transformation process. And then finally, case study examples. Understanding, for example, how a customer that's similar to you has gone through and then set up their data architecture. You may not use it directly, but understanding what those case studies are going to help you point towards the right direction then in terms of what you need to do to be able to get to that level. Now, as a partner, we can give you tons of these, but I will say the ownership, the vision for where you want to go as a business is really critical. And those case studies that we provide or that you find can help us align the examples of where you want to go as you go through this digital transformation process. So, getting these and understanding these is going to be a critical component as you go through this. Now, the other thing that you need to consider as well is ensuring really the future growth, right, inside of this digital transformation process. So we're focusing on obviously the people, the culture, the leadership buy-in, and all those values, right, from our first phase. In our second phase here, we're aligning obviously what that scalability, flexibility, and that application tech stack is going to be, right? But we want to make sure that that tech stack is designed for future growth. As an example, I pretty much tell everyone now that if you buy an ERP system, you should be running that ERP system for a minimum of 15 years. That is the lifetime of these systems. And the argument that's becoming more commonplace now is the fact that you may not have 15 years, you may actually have 30 to 40 years theoretically as that stack in the future here, especially with the introduction of cloud. So you're not going to be able to obviously, forecast typically even more than 5 years, right? But knowing that an application supports, for example, a large value or a large amount of customers that are bigger than you, as an example, are absolutely something that you should be considering as a part of it. But at the same point, don't try to scale where you're not going to scale, right? So that's as well where this modular architecture can come into play as part of it. When I look at a business system, when you implement, for example, BC with Stoneridge, what I'm thinking about as a chief software architect is that when you hit that $2 billion mark and you need to move from Business Central to finance and operations, I've got you covered. I have the ability as a partner to help you then grow and then replace out basically that Business Central system, but maybe you have some e-commerce system that you don't need to replace because you don't need to change the scale of that and it's working wonderfully and it's very compatible with the Microsoft stack, right? So being able to design a modular architecture in your digital transformation process is also a really critical concept. And then finally, being able to adapt to those change in market demands, where all of a sudden now there's a new technology beyond e commerce that's introduced. Well, don't change your entire platform, snap into the platform with partners that understand that modularity perspective with it. Because what you want to do is you want to take and reduce risk in the future where you can snap in and snap out different technologies to really drive that. Case in point, when you go through an implementation of Dynamics, one of the recommendations I typically make is that from a data architecture perspective with your existing data, don't import all that data into Dynamics. Import the active customers, active vendors, maybe some old sales orders, right, for some history, but not everything. And instead, build a data architecture where you consume basically the data from your prior system as a source. You build your new source, and then you join that data together from a reporting and visibility perspective. Because in Dynamics, as an example, we can embed Power BI reports that source multiple data sources to then bring that answer front and center inside of the business system. So being able to design these modular systems that then allow you to, as you can imagine, replace potentially different systems, but then snap in those systems in the future is a really important concept when it comes to digital transformation. Now, some of the other things that you need to consider are going to be these cross departmental collaborations as well. You need to work on breaking down silos within the organization, having quality own quality, and not take any input from, for example, people that are doing picking of products where you're staging those products. That's the wrong way to do it. You need to break down those silos because you need to build those collaborative tools and platforms to be able to share that data and those insights across multiple team members. This is something that is very different for some industries. More specifically, I have had it many times where the quality management system is separate basically from the ERP system, and there's so many things that impact, for example, on-hand inventory availability that if missed in the other system and you don't have a good integration, cause a lot of pain for other users in other departments. So being able to really tackle this from a cross-department perspective, where the technology supports all of the departments that are going into this story, is a really critical perspective when you look at your digital transformation. Now, after you've gone through and really done obviously the setup of the culture, the build out of what you're going to be using then for that digital transformation roadmap is really then going to be the expansion. How do I involve both internal and external parties, and how do I automate, for example, different types of machines or technologies internally that I need to tackle? And this is really important because if you look at digital transformation, if you're just doing it for yourself, you're probably doing it wrong. You're supposed to be doing this to extend, improve, and build so that way your partners have more accessibility to data, as an example, or your customers have a better experience through a digital channel, whether through e commerce or when they call you up or when they buy a product from you. You're able to make it more personalized, more focused around that consumer as part of that process. And what you want to do is you want to build an ecosystem where you can grab as much of that data as possible. And the reason I mention this is because statistics are where a lot of businesses are going to make decisions on what they need to do next, because they're looking at customer sentiment or customer input or ideas that customers are giving, as an example, or that their suppliers are basically improving in their process, right? So engaging your suppliers and customers beyond just the internal perspective here is really critical in that digital transformation process. And in your roadmap, you should be considering that. You should also then be considering, I've got a typo on here, I apologize, but using machine automation and IoT, as we've discussed in a couple of the other sessions, to basically, for example, implement IoT devices to do monitoring so that you can then get telematic or telemetry based information back into your product team so that they can design a better product. Or you can use automation, for example, so that when somebody sends an order request, that you have an AI system try to actually recreate that order inside of the system. And if it fails, well, then it brings it to a person to actually enter that order. But if it succeeds, fantastic. You just cut down 5 minutes of a person working on something that a machine tackled. And then, as you can imagine as well, with this, you're going to see that production efficiency increase by using IoT and machine automation really to drive that. So these are critical aspects beyond your digital transformation roadmap that you also need to consider as you go through this to make sure that your roadmap is including obviously the culture, the build out of the tech stack, and then finally, obviously, the build out of these machine automation and supplier relationships that you need to really transform your business. Now, one of the last ones that I want to leave you with is the one that we've talked a lot about this entire day around, which is artificial intelligence, right? You need to start thinking through how to leverage AI for competitive advantages and scaling inside of your organization. So, just as an example to that, you need to understand that in manufacturing, AI has many different areas where it can help you. It can help you, for example, do repetitive tasks. It can help you do summarization. It can help you analyze data and identify discrepancies or differences, for example, from month to month with a demand plan, as an example. So, AI in manufacturing is something, if you are a manufacturer, you should be focusing on because there is, in my professional opinion, no other technology that is out there that can impact the digital transformation roadmap more than AI right now in our current state. So, how you actually use AI, how it applies to manufacturing, and how you use it to get to those predictive analytics, such as preventative maintenance and other scenarios, is going to be really critical to understand where you're going to as that future state vision in your digital transformation roadmap. And the benefits and use cases of those, I'll just give a couple examples because they're really powerful. Predictive maintenance, for example, can be used inside of Dynamics to identify machines, and if they do break down, or if there is a repair that's needed, or if there's a repair for a like machine that was detected as a predictive event, well, you can actually then block that resource. So that way, when MRP runs, or material requirements planning, and then you have capacity planning that's involved with it to identify, I've got to do production, how much availability do I have at this machine that's now going through a repair event? Well, what can happen is that the MRP engine can reschedule or reset then expectations as to when that particular product is going to be delivered because of this downtime event, or what machine it has to go to in order to support that. You also have the ability, for example, for quality control improvements, for supply chain optimization. And the example I love to give with AI around that is using demand planning to basically identify, do you have products that are seasonal? Do you have products that are using what we call ARIMA, auto regression integrated moving average, that can determine then what you're going to be selling potentially in future months based upon historical performance? So these use cases and benefits from a manufacturing perspective really need to be identified as you go through that. And part of that digital transformation process is absolutely focusing on the AI enablement and what particular problems it solves, and potentially identifying new problems that AI could address as you go through that journey. Now, one of the areas that I want to kind of just leave you with as well is, how do you go through the steps to really implement AI solutions as part of it? And what you're going to do is you're going to do very similar to what we've talked about with our digital transformation journey above, which is you're going to prepare your data for AI and make sure, for example, that you have it secured and that you have the right governance in place with it. You're going to choose the right AI tool and partner to make sure then that, for example, they have a framework for security, for trust. They have the ability to give you examples of what use cases you should be looking at to be able to address those needs, right? But basically, you've got a strong partner that understands where AI is really good and where AI does not work really well, right? And then also, you want to pilot this. In the last session I did, I talked about AI and the enablement around it and how you should be starting to use it more and more often. Well, you need to start using some of these pilot projects to identify some of that low-hanging fruit that AI can address, those problem statements that AI can provide solutions for. And I will say this very explicitly, don't go into AI as the solution. Identify the problem first, and then think through whether or not AI or automation can address those particular issues. All right, just to kind of wrap it up, I want to bring up some key points here that you need to start thinking about when going through your digital transformation roadmap. First and foremost, remember the importance of the culture in data in preparation, right? If you've got a culture or a leadership team that doesn't believe in digital transformation, you're going to fail no matter what roadmap you make. If you don't identify what state your data is in, more than likely you're not going to do well as part of that digital transformation project, right? So you want to make sure you focus on the importance of that culture and data and preparation. You're going to want to build a solid technological foundation, right? And of course, I always feel a little bit selfish saying it, but at the same point, that's what we're here for. That's what I do day in and day out. I look at technologies, I say, are they something that can really help us or not? And it's not about how cool it is anymore at my age. It's about what makes it better. And better is going to be based off of the business need, right? I'm not leading with the technology. I'm trying to identify the need that the business has, and then we do the alignment of the technology. In your digital transformation roadmap, make sure that you are expanding your reach with collaboration. We talked about making sure to involve your suppliers, to involve your customers, so that way you have a much more holistic perspective of what digital transformation is going to happen in your organization and what that impact is going to be, for example, on a given customer or vendor or employee inside of your business. And then what automation events do you have that can make that even better? And then finally, make sure, and this is more critical now than ever, look at AI for growth and competitiveness. It's going to be something that more and more companies are investing in. And just as an example with it, we have customers now that are sending out, after they ship a product, personalized emails that are to that customer, that look at the data that we've collected for that given customer and make very, pointed emails that make that customer feel like they are the most important customer on the planet. If you can do that with the lowest revenue generating customer, just think of how much of a perception of your brand will be as you go through that digital transformation process. I can guarantee that it will be a positive effect and that our team can help you identify what those opportunity areas are as you go through that as well. Finally, call to action. Start assessing your current state today. If you have questions on how to do that, reach out to us. We go through digital transformation roadmaps all the time at Stoneridge. In fact, one of the products that we typically recommend at the very beginning of any implementation is what we call a roadmap. So incorporating that into your strategy is going to be very important. Make sure to not, if you're watching this session and you don't have any other leaders that are on it, send them this session. Get your stakeholders engaged so that they understand that digital transformation is about making sure that we're breaking down boundaries between departments, that we're thinking about how we can improve a process, not how it's done in the past or why it's done in the past. That does impact it, mind you, but at the same point, what we want to have in the future. Because in the future is where you want to be, obviously, and if you're thinking about the past, you're going to become stale and you're not going to be innovative. And also, start planning your digital transformation roadmap now. Start thinking through what steps you need to go through that. Identify the different frameworks that you could use with your digital transformation journey, because there's a couple of them that are out there. And if you have questions on which one to use, reach out to partners like us that can help you through that. These are, I think, the biggest areas that you can focus on from a call to action to really bring home those next steps as you go through, obviously, your digital transformation roadmap inside of your organization.